States creating the standardization. And so this is all part and parcel of that. Just like the UN pandemic treaty was written by the Biden administration. So even though it didn't get ratified, thank God, they were still trying to implement it when Trump had already gotten elected, but it was a lame duck Congress. And then Elon Musk put pressure on it. We put pressure on it. And they shot down in the spending bill the funding that would have basically passed the treaty. Martial law, forced ejections, all the stuff the governor of New York's trying to pass right now. So the globalists hit you with the same programs everywhere, internationally, nationally, locally, statewide. So you've got to really understand this. And look, Trump's smart. And he said, I don't want central bank digital currencies. I don't want internet IDs. I don't want to, restrict cryptocurrency. He's right on everything else. And he says, look, we're going to put tariffs on people like the UK that censor free speech. But then you have to understand, this is the enforcement mechanism. This isn't just so, we can deport illegal aliens, we can stop fraud, we can stop election fraud. Yes, with a national global ID, you can do that, but they never use it for that. There's all these other ways to stop illegals voting. Now, I've done my rant here. I want to thank the guest from the Citizens Council for Health Freedom for joining us. I've kind of given my short boil down there. There's so many angles to this, but you're welcome to go anywhere you'd like to go first, because I know you're a leading expert on this.
Well, I would love to just start out with the fact that the real ID is not what you think the real ID is. Most Americans are thinking this is just a standard state driver's license. And maybe before I go further, I just want to thank you, Alex, for bringing me on and letting your people know
It's
more
already
about
implemented
real
here in
IDs so that they can
Texas.
protect themselves against what the government is trying to do here. But a lot of people think that this is just a standard state driver's license with a star on it, but it is not that at all. And you have to look back at the 2005 legislation and the fact that U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander, when it was being debated on the floor of the U.S. Senate, said this is a national identification card. We haven't told the American people about this. Perhaps we should have a full debate, but of course they didn't do that. And Patty Murray, who's a Democrat at that very same time, was talking about how it hadn't, she hadn't voted for it, hadn't gone through the conference committee, and so she was also very uncomfortable with this. And yet, they created it. And so I think the big thing to understand is that this is a national ID card. It's a national ID system. It's not just a card. And that the plan for this is to digitize it, put it on your phone, and have remote access to it. And indeed, that is exactly what AMBA, which is the American Association for Motor Vehicle Administrators, that is what AMBA told Congress on December 5th, 2023. That's their plan. They plan to start with 2% of the Americans' cards, but their whole plan is to move us all the way to a digital ID, remotely accessible, and therefore, of course, they could be shut down. I think the other thing to know about this, which people don't understand, is what the law actually says. It's really important to know what the law says, because that's where you figure out what kind of flexibility they have, or are they just starting and they can go further? Well, yes, they're just starting and they can go further, because what the law says is that there are 3 official purposes for the Real ID card. Now, one of those official purposes is that access to nuclear facilities. Another one is access to certain federal buildings. The next one is access to commercial airlines. And that's what you're seeing now when they're saying that on May 7th you have to have a real ID to fly, which is not true. We can talk about that in a moment. But the thing that the law says is it's for those 3 official purposes and any other purposes as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Security. And that means that this one person, currently, Christy Nome, would have unilateral authority to decide that,
I'm about to do a lot of shit to try to.
for instance, maybe it had to be produced in order to buy a gun, or to get married, or to get a hotel.
Well, that's the point. It's the same system in Australia, same system everywhere. Once they get this in, they can tie it to everything,
They
turn
said
it
they
off,
couldn't
and
fix
use
it
it for the social credit score. They admit all
because the
that.
board was destroy it. Was
Well, they've never admitted that they're
burnt.
planning to do a social credit system, right? What they're saying is the government has no access to the federal data. All this is a security mechanism. You know, you shouldn't be worried about privacy. It's not a national ID card. But the fact is, you know, everybody who voted for it in 2005, it was said on the floor that this is a national ID card. And of course, if the federal government has control over it, which they do, then it is a national identification card. It is a national ID, and it will lead to, or at least pave the way, you know, to a Chinese-like social credit system. I mean, just imagine if we had Harris at this moment, the Harris administration. What kind of things might that card have to be produced for?
Well, I know you're a leading expert on this, but I track Bill Gates and Xi Jinping and the UN bodies that tie into our systems of standardized, and it's basically the same system rolling out everywhere, and it's all being integrated together. And I mean, they say it's already in the UK, tracking and controlling, and then in Australia they're saying out of 100 social credit points you'll be able to get on the internet. So they're rolling all this out. Once you have national ID that they can be tied to the international system, you've got everything to bring in the social credit score, to bring in the vaccine passports. And if you go look at the UN bodies and Bill Gates that's heavily involved in the regulation of that, advising it, they admit that that's what this is about. This is Klaus Schwab. All of them say this is what's happening. You have the European Central Bank coming out with its central bank digital currency. I mean, this stuff is all rolling out right now. Trump has said verbally, policy-wise, he's against all that. I just don't know if he understands that a national ID card that's tied to all this, that can be tied to all the databases, is this horrible control mechanism. I know he's got his different federal officials going after banks that have deplatformed and debanked, you know, his supporters and his own family. Does he understand that this mechanism is far more dangerous than even what's currently happening?
Well, I don't know if he does, but you know what was such a disappointment was that on Friday, on the 11th of April, Kristi Noem, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, comes out with this video direct from the department itself and said, basically, if you don't have a real ID on May 7th, you are not going to be able to travel. Well, that is a complete lie, because all you have to do is look at the department's own rule, which came out on January 14th, and you can see that it is a 2-year progressive enforcement rule. And within that rule, it talks about how they are very concerned about public backlash against the security agents at the airport. They're concerned about disruptions to operational procedures at the airport. They said that lots of the federal agencies will require it on day 1, May 7th of this year. But those that have high traffic numbers, like the airport, right? That's why they're giving them flexibility. That's the word that they use. That's why they say that they're going to delay the full implementation so that there are huge delays at the airport. But yet we had Kristi Noem coming out and scaring everybody, causing panic across the country, that if you don't have real ID by May 7th, you can't fly. And she never mentioned the fact that there are 15 other identification cards that will get you on the plane in case you have a passport or a VA card, a medical card, or a military card. She never mentioned any.
Yeah, they're trying to force adoption of something that is extremely dangerous. We have the video clip. The HHS secretary, here it is.
Hi, I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. If you plan on traveling, we need your help to prevent delays and to prove your identity. Get a real ID. Starting May 7th, you will need a real ID to travel by air or to visit federal buildings in the United States. These IDs keep our country safe because they help prevent fraud and they enhance security. Please do your part to protect our country. Go today and don't delay. To learn more, go to dhs.gov/real-ID. Thank you.
Now, Trump's been sold on this because they can use it to stop illegals voting. And of course they can. And it can be used to stop illegals flying. And I know from people at the Austin airport that are TSA and others that since he got in within a few weeks, the illegals are told, are you flying out of the country? If not, you've got to leave or we're going to go ahead and deport you right now. Some cases they're grabbing them. So they're definitely trying to round up the people that are illegal. But we can all be completely safe. We're all locked in a jail cell. The deep state, the neocons, the Democrats wanted this. They tried to implement it. It's unconstitutional. There's big problems doing it. Now Trump's resurrecting it. I understand the reasons, but again, there's other ways. I mean, the feds under Biden were letting illegals fly many times without even any ID. So it shows how government can implement this and selectively enforce it any way it wants.
I agree. Because, you know, the fact of the matter is that identification cards and identification in general, but also driving, has always been the purview of the states. And it is a violation of what the federal government is doing right now. It is a violation of the 10th Amendment. And the fact of the matter is that California and Minnesota, right, they're letting illegals vote. They're giving them driver's licenses. Well, just imagine again, if we had a Harris administration, they would probably allow these people to have the real ID. And so, you know, this is just about who's in control. And the last thing that we need is the federal government with a bad administration to be in control of everything that's happening in all 50 states. We need the 50 states. That's part of the reason our founders gave us 50 states and the 10th Amendment with states' rights. We need 50 states to keep the federal government in check. And so this absolutely must be gotten rid of. And I will tell you that on our special, this page that you're showing right now, this is our refuserealid.org page, refuserealid.org. And if you go down further on that page, you will see 3 documents. One of them shows 7 reasons why Real ID should be repealed. Another one shows you how, yes, you can still fly without a Real ID. And so there's 3 that are together in a row, and then the last one is where we call you to lose your Real ID. So lots of people don't know they have a Real ID. It's time for them to find out that they have it and go back to a standard state driver's license. Because the federal government wants to get to a point where they can just flip the switch and force everybody into a Real ID. But as long as we have enough people who do not have a Real ID in their pocket and have not been sold this bill of goods and goes and switches back, they will not be able to do it. And, you know, like I said, progressive enforcement rule. They intend progressive consequences according to the rule. And if you look at that, yes, you can fly. We have some very selective quotes in there. So you can see how Christy Noem's own rule says that for 2 years, some might not even have any enforcement at all.
Here's the 12 for people that don't know. They go to your site, look it up. How does somebody tell? And then how does this happen? You go to the DMV and then they just click you into it? And I know most states have it. I know you testified in Maine. We got that clip coming up next week. But this is really important, folks. They get this national ID. It's already going to go to the global ID. It is the master plan. The globalists admit it, to micromanage and run your life. That's where the technocracy is going. And if you think
Again, Texas has already implemented it into their ID. I do not know how to get it off of a Texas ID or driver's license.
Like every state has a star.
Please comment if you know how.
So you have to go back and state driver's license. And the way you will know that you have one of those is that it will say something like, not for federal identification purposes, or not for